The grand African kingdom stretched across golden plains, dense forests, and mighty rivers that flowed like veins through the land. Its people thrived under the rule of a wise and just king, and among them was Prince Jomari, known for his bravery and insatiable curiosity. Unlike the other royals who preferred the comforts of the palace, Jomari often ventured deep into the wild, seeking adventure and understanding the world beyond his privileged life. One late afternoon, while hunting near the river, the prince and his men heard the distant call of birds, scattering as if disturbed. Moving toward the source of the commotion, Jomari caught sight of something unusual near the water's edge, a motionless figure drifting with the current, barely clinging to life. Without hesitation, he rushed forward, wading into the shallows as his guards followed closely behind. As he pulled the figure onto the riverbank, his breath caught in his throat. It was a woman, her skin smeared with dirt and her garments tattered, but even through the signs of suffering, there was an undeniable grace to her features. Long dark lashes fluttered slightly. Her lips trembled as if trying to form words, but no sound came. The prince knelt beside her, brushing damp strands of hair from her face, his heart tightening at the sight of bruises scattered across her arms. The guards hesitated, exchanging wary glances. A woman found unconscious in the river, bearing no known identity, could bring danger. Some whispered superstitions of spirits and curses that lurked in the waters, of women who appeared in distress only to bring misfortune upon those who saved them. But Jomari silenced them with a sharp glance. Superstitions did not rule him. Compassion did. He lifted the woman gently, carrying her as one would a delicate treasure. The weight of her fragility pressed against him, but so did an unshakable feeling that her presence held a story far greater than what met the eye. He did not yet know her name, where she came from, or what cruel fate had led her to the river, but something in his soul told him that saving her would change his life forever. With firm resolve, he turned to his men. "Take her to the palace," he commanded. "She will be cared for." And with that, the woman, unknown and broken, was carried away toward a new destiny, unaware that the prince who had found her would soon become entangled in the shadows of the past she could not escape. Soft linen sheets rustled as the woman stirred, her body reacting before her mind could catch up. The world around her was unfamiliar. Tall carved pillars stretched toward the ceiling. Delicate curtains billowed against the open balcony, and the scent of medicinal herbs lingered in the air. She blinked, her vision adjusting to the golden glow of lanterns, the flickering flames casting shadows that danced along the walls. She tried to sit up, but a dull ache spread through her limbs, forcing her to fall back against the silk pillows. Panic surged through her chest. Where was she? How had she come here? Fragments of cold water, aching muscles, and a faceless fear flickered in her mind like dying embers. But when she reached deeper, there was nothing but an empty void where her memories should have been. The door creaked open, and a woman dressed in royal healer's robes entered, carrying a clay bowl filled with a warm tonic. She smiled gently, her presence soothing yet watchful. "You are awake," she said, setting the bowl on the wooden table beside the bed. "Drink this. It will help you regain your strength." The woman hesitated before lifting the cup to her lips, the bitter liquid burning its way down her throat. The healer observed her in silence, as if measuring her reactions, as if expecting something she herself did not understand. Moments later, the sound of approaching footsteps echoed through the corridor, steady and purposeful. The woman's heartbeat quickened as the door opened wider, revealing a tall figure in royal robes, his presence commanding yet strangely comforting. The prince. He stepped closer, his dark eyes studying her with a mixture of curiosity and concern. "You were found near the river," he said, his voice smooth but firm. "Unconscious, bruised. Do you remember anything?" The woman's lips parted, but no words came. The truth lay tangled inside her like a knot she could not unravel. She could feel memories lingering just beyond reach, like whispers in the wind, but every time she tried to grasp them, they slipped through her fingers. I don't know, she finally admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Prince Jomari studied her for a long moment, searching for deception in her expression, but all he found was uncertainty. If she was lying, she hid it well. "You will be given a name," he said after a pause, "until you remember your own." He glanced at the open balcony, where the night air carried the scent of blooming jasmine and distant rain. Nyara, he decided, the one who rose from the water. The name settled over her like a soft cloak, unfamiliar, yet oddly fitting. Days passed, and Nyara grew stronger under the care of the palace healers. She learned the rhythms of the royal household, the unspoken rules that dictated life within the grand walls. Servants whispered when they passed her, their eyes filled with speculation and curiosity. Some pitied her, others feared her, for a woman without a past was a woman without trust. Yet, Prince Jomari did not waver. He visited often, bringing books, warm meals, and quiet conversations that pulled small smiles from her when she thought no one was looking. He watched her closely, fascinated by the contradictions in her presence. The way she carried herself with an unspoken grace, yet flinched at sudden sounds. The way her hands trembled when left in silence for too long, as if haunted by something unseen. His advisors warned him, their voices heavy with caution. "A woman found in the river is a woman with secrets," they murmured. "She could be a danger to the throne." But Jomari dismissed their fears. He had seen something in Nyara's eyes, a storm held back by sheer will, a soul weighed down by a past she had yet to speak of. He did not know if she was a blessing or a curse, but he knew one thing with certainty. He was not ready to let her go. The palace buzzed with life as servants hurried through the halls, carrying trays of food, baskets of linens, and scrolls filled with royal decrees. Nyara had found a place among them, helping where she could, despite the whispers that followed her every step. At first, the palace staff had been wary of her, their gazes filled with suspicion, but her quiet determination and willingness to work softened their hearts. She learned quickly, whether it was arranging fresh flowers in the queen's chambers or assisting the cooks with preparing evening meals. The people of the palace began to admire her. She was gentle with the children who played near the courtyards, patient with the elderly servants, and always willing to lend a hand. But it was her kindness that stood out most, an effortless, natural warmth that made even the coldest hearts reconsider their judgments. Prince Jomari found himself watching her more often than he intended. He saw how she carried herself, how she fought to belong despite the uncertainty of her past. There was a strength in her, something unbreakable, and it fascinated him. One evening he found her in the royal gardens, kneeling beside a small patch of lilies. The sun had begun its descent, painting the sky in hues of gold and crimson. He stepped forward, his voice gentle. "You have a way with flowers." Nyara turned, startled at first, but then she smiled. "They do not ask questions," she said, brushing a delicate petal with her fingertips. "They only bloom, no matter where they are planted." He studied her, sensing the weight behind her words. "And where were you planted, Nyara?" She hesitated, her fingers stilling against the flowers. "I remember little. Flashes of places, voices I can't place. A river, but not the one you found me in. A home, though I do not know where it is." Her voice softened. "And fear. I remember fear." Jomari felt something tighten in his chest. He wanted to tell her she was safe now, that no harm would come to her within the palace walls. But something in her expression warned him that the fear she spoke of was not something easily erased. Instead, he said, "You do not have to force your memories back. They will come when they are ready." She met his gaze then, and for the first time, he saw something unguarded in her eyes. Trust. The days passed, and stolen moments in the gardens became something of a routine. They spoke of small things, of books Jomari enjoyed, of the stars that Niara found comfort in, of the laughter of the palace children. She revealed fragments of her past, though she carefully avoided the shadows that lingered there. But not everyone in the palace looked upon their growing closeness with approval. The queen had noticed the way her son's eyes lingered on the servant girl. The royal advisers had begun whispering, their concern evident. A prince could not fall for a woman with no name, no lineage, no past. It was dangerous, unpredictable. During an evening council, the queen finally spoke her disapproval. "She is a stranger, Jomari. You do not know who she is, what she brings with her." Jomari did not flinch. "She brings nothing but kindness." "Kindness does not secure a kingdom," one of the advisers warned. "A prince's heart is not his alone to give." Jomari's jaw tightened. "She has done nothing to earn your suspicions." "She has done nothing to ease them either," the queen said, her tone firm. But Jomari would not be swayed. He had seen the way Niara carried her burdens, the way she fought for a life she did not yet understand. He could not explain it, not fully, but he knew this. She had been placed in his path for a reason, and he would not abandon her. The kingdom had always thrived in harmony with nature, but lately something felt amiss. Birds that once sang at dawn now fell silent, their absence unsettling. The palace horses grew restless, their eyes darting toward unseen threats. The wind whispered through the trees, carrying voices that were not there. Servants spoke of eerie sensations, cold hands brushing against their skin, footsteps in empty hallways, shadows stretching where they shouldn't be. Niara tried to ignore the unease, convincing herself it was nothing more than paranoia, but the nightmares came regardless. Every night, she found herself drowning, flames licking the edges of a forgotten memory, a palace engulfed in fire, screams piercing the night, hands reaching for her, not to save her, but to drag her into the darkness. And always, the river, the rushing waters swallowing her whole. She woke up gasping, drenched in sweat, her heart pounding against her ribs. But the worst part was that it no longer felt like just a dream. It felt like something real. The whispers in the palace grew louder when an old woman arrived at the gates. Dressed in tattered robes, her skin wrinkled with age, she demanded an audience with the queen. The guards hesitated. She was no noble, no messenger from a foreign land. But there was something about her, something ancient, that made them obey. The queen met her in the great hall, her expression unreadable as she studied the old woman. "What brings you here, elder?" The woman's eyes darted across the room, searching, until they landed on Niara, who had entered the hall, drawn by the commotion. The moment their gazes met, the old woman gasped and stumbled back, her frail body trembling. "The curse of the river," she whispered, horror lacing her voice. The hall fell silent. Prince Jomari stepped forward. "What are you talking about?" The woman pointed a shaking finger at Niara. "She carries it. The river took her, but it was not meant to let her go." Niara felt the weight of every eye in the room fall upon her, but she could not move, could not breathe. "What curse?" Jomari demanded. The old woman's voice trembled. "Long ago, a great wrong was committed. Blood was spilled where it never should have been. The river does not forget. It does not forgive. The woman's voice broke. "She should not be here." The queen's expression darkened. "What do you know of this girl?" The woman hesitated, as if deciding whether to speak. But then she sighed. "She is not what she seems." Niara's hands clenched. "Who am I then?" The old woman looked at her with sorrowful eyes. "You are the daughter of the fallen kingdom." A sharp pain shot through Niara's head. Images flashed before her, the fire, the screams, the betrayal. She staggered, gripping her temples as fragmented memories crashed into her. She had not always been lost. She had been a princess. Her kingdom once prosperous, had been brought to ruin by greed, by jealousy, by someone who had wanted her gone, and they had nearly succeeded. She had been forced into the river, left to drown, but the water had spared her, only to bring her to another fate. The room spun, the weight of truth suffocating her. Prince Jomari reached for her, steadying her. "Nyara, what is it?" Tears burned her eyes as she looked at him. "I remember." The past she had buried was clawing its way back, and with it came a terrifying realization. Whoever had tried to kill her before would not stop until she was gone for good. Memories flooded back like a tidal wave, drowning Nyara in the truth she had long forgotten. She was not just a lost woman found in the river. She was Zalika, the last princess of a fallen kingdom. She remembered her mother's voice, soft yet strong, whispering warnings of a prophecy. She saw the fire engulfing her home, the soldiers storming in, the cruel face of the enemy king who had ordered their destruction. She felt the terror of that night, the way she had been dragged to the river's edge, thrown into the raging waters by those who wished to erase her existence. Her mother had always told her she was meant for something greater, that one day she would rise and bring justice to those who had wronged her. And now, standing in the grand palace of another kingdom, she understood why she had survived. Jomari held her shoulders, his eyes searching hers. "Zalika, this is who you are." Tears welled in her eyes, but she nodded. Yes. The weight of the revelation settled in the room like a storm cloud. The Queen's face was unreadable, but the council members exchanged uneasy glances. "This is dangerous," one of them murmured. "If what she says is true, then we are harboring the rightful heir of a fallen kingdom, one that was destroyed by a powerful enemy." Another advisor stepped forward. "If they discover she is alive, it could bring war upon us." Jomari's jaw tightened. "She is not a threat." The Queen finally spoke, her voice cold and measured. "She may not be, but the truth is, if the enemy kingdom learns that the princess they sought to erase is still breathing, they will not hesitate to finish what they started." Zalika's heart pounded. She had spent so long hiding from her past, but now that it had returned, there was no running from it. One of the elder council members stepped closer to the Queen. "Your Majesty, there is only one way to ensure the safety of our kingdom. She must leave." "No!" Jomari's voice echoed in the chamber. "She belongs here. She belongs with me." The Queen's gaze hardened. "Jomari, do not let your feelings cloud your judgment. You are a prince. You have a duty to your people." Jomari clenched his fists, anger flashing in his eyes. "And what of my duty to the woman I love?" The room fell silent. Zalika felt her heart tighten at his words. He loved her. Even now, with the weight of her past threatening to crush them, he still chose her. The Queen sighed, looking at her son with something between sorrow and resolve. "You do not understand what you are asking, my son. If she stays, our kingdom will become a target. Our peace will be shattered." The council murmured in agreement. Zalika swallowed hard. She had spent her whole life surviving. But now, survival was not enough. She had to choose, run again, or face the fate that awaited her. Jomari turned to her, desperation in his eyes. "We will find a way. We always do." But deep down, Zalika knew the truth. The past was not done with her. And if she stayed, it would come for them all. The news spread like wildfire. The lost princess of the fallen kingdom was alive. The whispers reached the farthest corners of the land, carried by spies and travelers, until there was no denying it. Princess Zalika had returned. The enemy king, a ruthless ruler named King Balthazar, was not a man who tolerated threats to his power. His kingdom, built on manipulation and bloodshed, had long sought to eliminate Zalika's bloodline to prevent the prophecy from coming true. A new wave of terror gripped Zalika's kingdom as Balthazar's men marched toward the palace, determined to finish what they had started. Prince Jomari, now fully aware of the danger that hung over them, took immediate action. His warriors trained, prepared for the worst. Zalika's fear for her own life had begun to dissipate, replaced with a sense of purpose. She had spent so long running, hiding from the truth. But now the truth was here, and she had a chance to fight back. The night came, dark and cold, as the enemy forces crept toward the palace. The moon barely pierced the heavy clouds, casting an eerie glow over the battlements. Zalika stood at the balcony of the royal palace, her gaze fixed on the horizon. Jomari joined her, his presence a comfort despite the imminent danger. "They're coming," he said softly, his voice tense. Zalika nodded. "I know." He turned to her, his hand gently brushing her cheek. "Whatever happens, I will protect you." "I will fight beside you," Zalika replied, her voice steady. Suddenly, the sound of horns echoed in the distance, an unmistakable signal of war. The enemy had arrived. The palace erupted into action as soldiers took their positions. Jomari's warriors readied themselves, their faces grim but resolute. Zalika, feeling the weight of the moment, stood tall, her heart pounding with determination. The attack came swiftly, like a storm crashing against the walls of the palace. The enemy's forces were fierce, armed with swords and shields, their movements coordinated and deadly. But they had underestimated the strength of the royal forces, who fought fiercely to protect their land and their princess. Zalika stood at the front lines, her instincts kicking in as she directed the soldiers, using her knowledge of strategy to outmaneuver the enemy. Her agility, combined with the strength she had gained during her time in the palace, made her a formidable force. Amid the chaos, she saw him, the figure she had only heard of in whispers. King Balthazar, tall and imposing, appeared at the gates of the palace, flanked by his personal guards. His cold eyes locked onto hers as he stepped forward, his presence sending a shiver down her spine. "You," he sneered, his voice dripping with disdain. "I should have known you were alive." Zalika stood firm, her hands clenched into fists. "You destroyed my kingdom, and now you come to finish the job." Balthazar's lips curled into a cruel smile. "It was always meant to be this way, princess. Your father betrayed us. He sealed his fate, and yours along with it." The words hit Zalika like a physical blow. Her father had always been a beacon of strength and honor, but the truth that Balthazar revealed shattered her perception of him. Her father, the once noble king of the fallen kingdom, had betrayed his own people, leading to the downfall of their land. She looked at Balthazar, her eyes blazing with fury. "You lie." Balthazar's expression hardened. "It's true. Your father made an alliance with us, only to break it when he saw that the prophecy foretold that your bloodline would rise against us. He thought he could save his kingdom, but he was wrong. I had him killed, and your kingdom fell with him." Zalika's breath caught in her throat. The man who had once been her hero, the man she had idolized, had been nothing more than a traitor. Her heart ached with the weight of betrayal, but she would not allow him to destroy any more lives. "I am not my father," Zalika said, her voice firm, "and I will not let you have the power you seek." With those words, Zalika stepped forward, her body brimming with the power she had learned to wield over the years. She was no longer the frightened woman who had been swept into the river. She was Zalika, the rightful heir of a kingdom, and she would reclaim her destiny. Jomari's voice rang out from behind her. "You don't have to fight alone." He stood with his army, a sea of warriors ready to fight to the last man for their princess. Zalika turned to him, a silent gratitude in her eyes. With Jomari's strength at her side, she was no longer just a survivor. She was a leader, a force to be reckoned with. The final confrontation began. Zalika's mind raced as she strategized, her father's betrayal still echoing in her thoughts. She pushed it aside, focusing on the present. The palace had to survive. Her people had to survive. And she would make sure that Balthazar's reign of terror ended here, tonight. Jomari and his warriors fought valiantly, their swords clashing against the enemies. Zalika, with the fire of her ancestors burning in her soul, moved with precision and grace. Her every move was calculated, each strike landing with deadly accuracy. She had once been a princess with no power, but now she was a queen in the making, leading her people into battle. Balthazar watched from a distance, his eyes narrowed with hatred. He had underestimated her, but he would not lose. Not now. He charged toward Zalika, his sword raised high. The battle between them was inevitable. Their swords met with a deafening clash. Zalika felt the force of his strike, but she stood her ground, her own blade striking with a power that surprised even her. She moved with a fluidity that was almost supernatural, her instincts guiding her every motion. Balthazar gritted his teeth, his anger growing with every parry. "You think you can defeat me, girl? You are nothing!" Zalika's eyes flashed with defiance. "I am everything you fear." With a swift, precise strike, Zalika disarmed Balthazar, sending his sword clattering to the ground. She stood over him, her blade at his throat. "This is the end for you," she said, her voice low and steady. "Your reign ends tonight." Balthazar's eyes flickered with fear as he realized his defeat. But it was too late. The justice that Zalika had promised had come for him. With a final, decisive move, Zalika ended his life, her sword driving deep into his chest. The enemy king fell to the ground, his reign of terror finally over. The battle raged on, but the tide had turned. With Balthazar's death, his forces lost their will to fight. The royal army, now united and empowered, drove them back, securing the palace once and for all. Zalika, covered in the blood of her enemies, stood victorious. She had faced the past and conquered it. She had reclaimed her birthright, and she had brought justice to the people who had suffered for so long. Prince Jomari stood beside her, his eyes filled with pride and love. "You did it, Zalika. You are the queen your people have always needed." Zalika looked around at the battlefield, at the ruins of her enemies, but she also saw the faces of her people. People who were free, who could now rebuild, who could finally heal. "I didn't do this alone," she said, her voice strong. "We did it together." And with that, Zalika, once a lost princess, had become the ruler she was always destined to be, her kingdom restored, her past redeemed, and her future a new beginning. The battlefield lay silent in the aftermath of the war. The sounds of clashing swords and battle cries had faded, leaving only the cries of the wounded and the flickering glow of the torches. The ground was stained with the blood of enemies and allies alike, but the light of a new day broke through the darkness, signaling the dawn of a new era for Zalika and her kingdom. Zalika stood in the midst of it all, her breathing heavy, her body bloodied and bruised from the fight. She gazed across the fallen soldiers, her heart still racing from the battle that had determined the fate of her people. She had fought fiercely, alongside Jomari and his warriors, and in the end, they had triumphed. The enemy king, Balthazar, was dead, and his forces scattered, leaving behind a broken kingdom in their wake. But while the battle was won, the war within Zalika's heart raged on. She had been faced with a choice, whether to reclaim her throne, to return to the kingdom that was once hers, or to stay in Jomari's kingdom, where love had blossomed despite the dark past she carried with her. She had spent her entire life running from the truth, hiding from her destiny. But now, standing among the ruins, she knew that she could no longer hide. The world was waiting for her, and she had to make a choice. Jomari approached her, his steps cautious, yet full of purpose. His face was bruised, but his eyes shone with the same love and pride that had been there since the beginning. "Zalika," he said, his voice soft but steady, "you've given everything to this battle. You've avenged your people. Now, it's time for you to decide. What will you do now?" Zalika met his gaze, her heart heavy with the weight of the decision before her. The thought of reclaiming her throne filled her with both a sense of duty and dread. Her kingdom, her people. She had lost them once before, and the thought of leading them again was overwhelming. The burden of royalty, of ruling a broken kingdom, seemed too great for her. But then there was Jomari. His love for her had never faltered, even when the truth of her identity had been revealed. He had stood by her side, fought with her, and offered her a place in his kingdom, in his life. His offer was more than just a proposal. It was a promise of a future, of a life built on love and unity. "I don't know if I can go back," Zalika whispered, her voice barely audible. "The throne, it feels like a weight I can't bear." Jomari stepped closer, his hand reaching for hers. "You don't have to carry that weight alone, Zalika. I'm with you. We can build a future together, in my kingdom or in yours, whatever you choose." Zalika's eyes filled with tears, the emotions she had kept buried for so long threatening to surface. "But what about the people of my kingdom? What about my legacy?" she asked, her voice trembling. "I don't know if I can abandon them. I'm their princess, their heir. I promised them justice." Jomari's expression softened, his hand gently cupping her face. "You've already given them justice, Zalika. You've avenged their deaths, and you've restored their honor. They'll always remember you as the princess who rose from the ashes. But the future, it's yours to decide. You don't have to carry the weight of the past alone." For a moment, Zalika was silent, her gaze drifting over the horizon. The ruins of the battlefield were now beginning to fade in her mind, replaced by the faces of the people she had lost, the kingdom she had once called home. Her heart ached for them, but she knew that she couldn't live in the past. It was time for her to embrace a new life, a new destiny. "I don't know what the future holds," Zalika said finally, her voice steady now. "But I do know that I can't do this without you, Jomari. You've given me something I thought I had lost. Hope. I'm not ready to face the past yet, but with you by my side, I think I can build something new." Jomari smiled, his eyes full of relief and joy. "Then we'll face the future together. I'll stand with you, always." As they stood together, their hands intertwined, a new chapter of their lives began. But even in the midst of their love, Zalika could not forget the kingdom she had left behind. Her past would always haunt her, but it would not define her. She had risen from the water, from the ashes of her fallen kingdom, and now she would rise again. This time, as a woman not defined by her past, but by the future she chose to create. Later that day, as the sun set behind the mountains, Zalika stood before the palace gates, her heart filled with a sense of purpose. The battle was over, but the journey was just beginning. The people of Jomari's kingdom had already begun to rebuild, and Zalika would play a vital role in shaping this new world. It was then that the queen approached her, her expression wary but thoughtful. She had watched Zalika's journey closely, seen her strength, her courage, and her unwavering love for her son. And now, the queen understood that Zalika was no longer the lost princess of a fallen kingdom. She was a queen in her own right. "Zalika," the queen said, her voice surprisingly soft, "I've seen what you've done for my son, for this kingdom. You are more than just a survivor. You're a leader, and I accept you, not just as Jomari's love, but as the queen he deserves." Tears welled in Zalika's eyes as she bowed her head in gratitude. "Thank you, Your Majesty. I never wanted to cause division between us. I only wanted to protect him." The queen placed a hand on Zalika's shoulder. "You've done more than protect him. You've made him stronger, and for that, I am grateful." And with that, Zalika's acceptance into Jomari's family was sealed. No longer would she be seen as an outsider, the woman with no name. She was Zalika, the queen, the woman who had fought for love and justice. That evening, Jomari knelt before her, his heart laid bare. "Zalika," he said, his voice filled with emotion, "I've waited for this moment, and I will never stop loving you. Will you be my queen? Zalika's heart raced as she gazed into his eyes. She had come so far, faced so much, but this moment felt like the culmination of everything she had fought for. The choice was clear now. She had found her destiny, and it was not in the throne she had left behind, but in the man standing before her. "Yes," she whispered, her voice filled with emotion. "Yes, Jomari, I will be your queen." And in that moment, a new destiny began for Zalika and Jomari, a destiny built on love, strength, and the promise of a future that would be shaped by their hands together.